Okay. Hello, everyone. Again, welcome to the second day of the Foundation Future Leaders Conference. For anyone who wasn't here yesterday, I'm Gavin Costigan from the Foundation for Science and Technology. Obviously, many of you did join us yesterday. If you weren't able to join us for that one, you did miss a really great session, but you'll get the chance to see it because recordings of all the sessions will be available on our website early next week. Today's session focuses on research and innovation in industry. As yesterday, if you're tweeting, do try and tag us at @FoundSciTech and use the hashtag FutureLeaders. So some of you heard this yesterday, but just a brief word about the technology. We're using Zoom in the webinar function, and there'll be plenty of opportunities to ask questions. So please use the Q&A function. If you hover your cursor at the bottom of the Zoom screen, you'll see the Q&A button. So you can ask questions, but you can also upvote other people's questions and comment on other people's questions. So do keep that going throughout the course of the morning. And upvoting does help the chair decide which of the most popular questions to ask when it comes to the Q&A period. So let me hand you over to the chair for today's session. It's being chaired by Jonathan Neal, who is Chief Operating Officer at McLaren Group. Jonathan, over to you.
Thank you very much, Gavin. And can I join you, Gavin, in welcoming you all to this second day of the Foundation Future Leaders Conference. The title for today's session is Research and Innovation in Industry. And the idea is to explore two themes. The first theme that we have is how companies, small and large, use science and technology to innovate, creating both products and services. And the second theme we're looking at is to explore how industry works, both with the academic sector and with government to do that. So it's quite a broad subject. For this format, we have two keynote speakers, one from a small company and one from a large multinational, followed by a panel session. At the start of the panel session, I'll ask each of the panelists to give a brief intervention, and then I'll introduce them at that time. And then we'll move into the Q&A session, as Gavin has said, and we'll be using the Q&A function that you'll find within the Zoom app that we're using today. So do start asking questions at any time during the event, and I'll be able to see those. You'll also be able to upvote those if you see something that particularly resonates with you. And now it's time for our first keynote speaker, Dr. Lubna Burfa. Dr. Lubna is a machine learning scientist turned entrepreneur. She's the founder and CEO of OKRA Technologies, an artificial intelligence data analytics company for healthcare. Lubna is also currently a member of the European Union High-Level Expert Group on Artificial Intelligence, where she is particularly focused on healthcare and achieving competitive business impact with AI. Lubna, welcome, and over to you. I think, Lubna, you're on mute at the moment. If you unmute yourself.
Thank you, Jonathan. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here. It's an honor to be here and share my journey in AI and entrepreneurship. So I'm the CEO, founder of OKRA Technologies, a leading AI company in life sciences. So today I want to share with you my journey as an entrepreneur, explaining the challenges that I faced while driving the implementation of AI in healthcare. So my journey with AI started 13 years ago when I embarked as a PhD student in a project back in 2007 to build a cockpit for surgeons in the operating room. So using AI to predict surgical workflow and detect anomalies in real time in the OR. So this cockpit was designed to predict the complexity of a surgical procedure before surgery, to make suggestions in real time during surgery, and to recommend the best post-operative care after surgery. So the data was coming from different sources. Some of it was coming from historical data of patients. Some of it was streamed in real time from the devices in the operating room, from sensors, from navigation systems, and from video in the OR. And back then, the only surgeon I could convince to work with me on this idea, after talking to many people, was Professor Feusner in Germany. All the other surgeons I spoke with in Holland, in the US, in the Nordics, to start a collaboration, felt that their work could not be automatically interpreted by a machine. That what they did was very special, was an art, and that no machine could help make it better. So I was very happy to find someone to collaborate with. And back then I felt that the shift towards the implementation of machine-human interaction and AI systems in healthcare was not going to be quick nor easy, but that never stopped me from my goal of building AI system into healthcare and finding a way to bring it to real world. So this mission led me, after spending a few years in academia and in industry, to found OKRA Technologies back into late 2015. So I believe AI holds huge potential across healthcare. And we are facing today many challenges from what we saw with the COVID, the global challenges we're facing. Our population is growing to 10 billion people on Earth by 2050. And the impact of AI to sustain a healthy population of 10 billion is enormous. As an entrepreneur, I looked at how can we maximize this impact with AI, especially from the scale angle. So let's consider, for example, the NHS. NHS service is like providing services to 66 million people. So if we build an AI system to drive decision-making across the NHS, that to deliver care accurately to this amount of people, given the complexity of the work, we can serve so many people, so it has high impact. But as an entrepreneur, working with public healthcare services is not easy from a startup perspective, but also from a scale perspective. If we shift the vision to another stakeholder, instead of going to healthcare providers, to another stakeholder in the ecosystem, which was pharma, if we look how AI can help driving the right treatment to the right patient, we can reach patients even on much, much bigger scale. Just to give you an example, there are at least 200 million people who are using statins worldwide, and millions of those patients are taking maybe those statins unnecessarily, or they could be better on other treatments. So if we use AI to confine the prescription, to drive the prescription to higher precision to millions of patients, we can get to more individualized prescription of treatments and achieve a huge impact using technologies such as AI. So therefore, I decided to start OKRA and work with life science sector to tackle these big problems. And as CEO, I have tried to build OKRA's reputation to become a leading AI company for life sciences in Europe, and supporting the industry across multiple stages of the pipeline to bring in the right treatment to the right patients and at speed. So now we work with top pharma clients across Europe and the US, and using AI, especially to bridge the communication gaps between life sciences and other stakeholders in the ecosystem. So in development of OKRA, we always, as a team, we've been committed to diversity, not only to build unbiased and strong AI technology. Our team has 15 nationalities across. We're based in Cambridge, UK, and Leiden, Holland. Almost 50% of our employees are female, and the strength of our unity has resulted in a workplace that is open, transparent, and focused on building strong, long-lasting relationships. Especially this showed during COVID-19, while we kept steadfast to the mission and continually grew the company through innovative initiatives that could help clients respond to the crisis. So we work very closely to colleges here in Cambridge and also to the University of Leiden. And we believe, especially in these times, to bridge that gap and prepare the young generation to make the right choices, in the transition to industry is very, very crucial. Okay, so how is the OKRA journey? So my role at OKRA is shifted in a bit. So at the beginning, I was quite involved in almost everything. I used to be involved in every part of the process. But as we've grown, we now have a strong management team and a full team working on different areas. And my role now is about shaping the company's vision, building strategic collaboration between the public and the private sector, and working with our clients on uptake and acceleration, speeding the process of adopting AI. If we look to Europe, only 25% of the European businesses are using AI at the moment, and I'm trying to raise that percentage significantly, especially within the life science sector. So in starting OKRA, I've experienced also some forms of biases of being an academic, moving to entrepreneurship, being a scientist. When pitching to VCs, you're not a saleswoman, you are not a seasoned entrepreneur, you're an academic. And also being a woman was not easy in this space, in the tech and the corporate environment. So many expect you to be nicer, to be somehow different. And this can be a barrier, but I firmly believe that men and women, if we stay close to who we are and being close to our own identity, ourselves and our team, that will drive value for the business. So as a CEO driving a tech company in life science sector, I also have witnessed a general tendency in the industry to value status quo rules and traditional processes. And if you look to AI is this technology that is not rule-based, that learns and it's adaptive and uses probabilities instead of rules and uses correlations instead of causation. So it's a blended technology, so which can of course be crucial for as a change in a business. And that is something that the shift from these traditional processes is not easy, but we see, especially during COVID times, that there is a huge shift happening. So this is a challenge, but I try to see the strength in how can we make that shift? How can we position ourselves as a company that help our clients make that shift, and to allow people work much smarter and reduce the mundane tasks in their daily jobs to focus on what really matters and driving the vision of healthcare. So next slide. So what is the challenges that we're really facing here? I mean, I can say the big barrier for technology adoption is the notion of trust, and something that especially around AI. So how can we create enough trust that a machine has something to offer? How can we make sure that we as humans can rely on a machine in our decision making? So if you think about it, the aviation industry is already doing this much before. Pilots and autopilots are already working together every day in aviation. A group of Oxford researchers published 2 years ago a BMG article, and I really like that, and I want to quote them. So they said, we don't need AI to pass the Turing test to be helpful in healthcare. And the equivalent of the Turing test in aerospace engineering would be to create an airplane which flies like a bird, which has clearly not been the case. So if they had sought to mimic birds' flapping wings and feathers, they would have created an unsafe and ineffective transport mechanism. And that's why we should treat healthcare like engineering and focus on building AI systems that help healthcare stakeholders and professionals navigate through complexity to meet the ultimate objective of more accurate and effective diagnosis for patients. And this is exactly in the heart of this debate around human-machine interaction. This is a great example of how AI systems should work today, not only in healthcare, but across many industries, and where I believe they have the most impact. supporting us in our defined outcome, shifting our industry from volume driven to circular, and relieving us of mundane repetitive tasks. So, as you know, the World Economic Forum recognized this combination of AI and data as the fourth industrial revolution. So AI is considered to be the new electricity. If we look at the enormous amounts of data that is distributed, of course, across public and private sector, and we need to collaborate more to drive that. But if you look how many data we generate, 90% of this data we generated only in the last 2 years. That is equivalent to 2.5 quintillion bytes of data generated every single day. And so with this amount of data, we should stop talking about whether or not we should adopt AI or what were solutions we should adopt, and start thinking how can we leverage this data to meet our valuable outcomes and to achieve our goals. So to me, this started with one thing. It's about embracing uncertainty in the process. So although AI, started back in the second digital revolution around symbolic logic, around rule-based systems, it had made a big shift to probabilistic as the art of probability. In many ways, AI mimics the way we learn. It learns from the past to navigate the future. And today, uncertainty is the soul of AI systems. It can be found in different forms across different stages during how we represent our data, how we train our systems. But if you look to the output of an AI system, it's a probability score. The raw output is a probability score telling us how likely something is going to happen, how likely a patient will respond to a treatment, how likely we're going to get relief from COVID in a specific time. So it's always a probability score. So our strength as human beings is our ability to tolerate uncertainty in our lives. And in this way, we're very, very similar in our learnings to AI. But the trouble is, if you look to the way we make decisions today, our businesses, uncertainty is stigmatized. It's a sign of humility, which doesn't reflect the confidence as in industry that we strive. And that is, I think, the big shift that needs to happen. Many people ask, why this system or this AI system is not 100% accurate. But if the world is uncertain, we cannot be. We need to accept a margin of uncertainty in our decision making. So how can we make that shift? I can share with you in healthcare that shift is happening right now. We know that in the past we had a healthcare system that's a one-size-fits-all system, and we made the shift to stratified medicine, so more with a logic and stratifying patients to groups. But now we aim for a bigger and bigger ambition to individualized medicine, where only with the help of this technology we can serve individual patients with individual needs. And to make that shift, we need to, I call it, to make a spring jump in our decision making and our processes in healthcare. So that spring jump is, I believe now is the time. If you look to 2020, we are at an inflection point, not only because we are in a pandemic and a lot of things are changing around us. I would compare it to the early 90s when we saw the invention of the internet, and companies that adopted the internet early, they had the most benefits. And if we want to make precision medicine a reality by 2030, we need to make this spring jump now, to leap ahead using AI, to empower healthcare stakeholders and not bypass them, to empower every professional across the ecosystem using this technology. So at the moment, I don't believe that the problem is the lack of technology. I believe the problem is the mindset, the tunnel vision. In healthcare and in many industries, every stakeholder is stuck in their own incentive bubble. And between these stakeholders, a lot of information is lost in translation, and the patient needs or the citizen needs are forgotten because of that. Whether you're from public sector or private sector, everyone is in this tunnel vision. So how can we solve this? It's similar to the surgeon in his operating room. So how can we solve that? To solve this situation, we need to use AI to bridge the communication among those stakeholders. And if we don't, what can happen? The worst that can happen is that our public healthcare system that we really like and that drives healthcare, especially in Europe, can disappear. And another big tech giant can replace the whole system by providing much more efficient and effective healthcare infrastructure. And that's why we need to use the technology in the right way. So this is the spring jump that I'm talking about, and I see the second around AI transformation is the time where we are now, and that's where OKRA is working in accelerating growth and the value creation for healthcare, and by focusing on life sciences as one of the key stakeholders. So I believe we all can be catalysts of innovation from where we sit, whether we are on a big company, small company, academia, or public sector. We can all be those catalysts that communicate with the others and find way to share data, to collaborate, and to build systems that can innovate and serve the 10 billion population that we're expecting. So to conclude, I would like to say this is for me the three key things when we start any collaboration about AI, and to see whether AI would be the right tool for it. It's choosing the right outcomes, because we are moving to a circular economy. What are the right outcomes that we're driving, whether we're in healthcare or manufacturing or any or IT? We see what is the right outcomes for the citizens here. The second thing is we should look back only when it matters. A lot of so I would call it evidence-based industries, where we need to learn from the past to drive decisions for the future. That's where we need to use AI, because AI is fueled with a lot of historical data. But in industries where we need to build a vision for the futures, where like to invest, where to shape the opinion for tomorrow, I don't think we should be using AI. I think we should be building that vision, and we should not, what worked yesterday wouldn't work for today. And last but not least, we should empower people and don't bypass them. We should not use AI to completely, we should keep the human in the loop and take and automate parts of the job that could be automated with high accuracy, but define a role for the human and upskill our workforce to be relevant. So yeah, I would say if we avoid the discomfort that AI systems are not always 100% accurate, and that no mistakes will happen, we will constrain innovation from making our world a better place, and ultimately end up in a culture of control, fear, and lack of innovation. So I hope this was helping, this talk, and I hope you enjoy it. And yeah, I look forward to answer your questions. Thank you.
No, thank you very much indeed for a very insightful talk. Lots of leadership themes and issues in there around pitching ideas, overcoming resistance, and perhaps a recurring theme about some of the challenges and difficulties of moving from discovery science all the way through to translation, industry, and scale up, and meeting the resistance. And I can assure you there is as much resistance in coming from the academic end down to the industrial end as there is coming from the industrial end back up into the academic session. So there's some themes there for our audience to reflect on. Thank you. Our second keynote speaker this morning is Steve Rees. Steve is Vice President of the Discovery Biology Department at AstraZeneca. He's had other previous roles at AstraZeneca, and before that, 24 years at GlaxoSmithKline. Steve has led multiple international collaborations and has authored more than 65 scientific papers. He is currently chairman of the European Laboratory Research and Innovation Group. Steve, it's great to have you with us this morning. Thank you for giving us your time. Over to you.
Many thanks, Jonathan, and also to Gavin for giving me the opportunity to talk today, and Lubna for a great presentation. So what I'd like to do in the next 15 minutes or so is talk a little bit about science, technology, and innovation at AstraZeneca, but maybe more broadly than that, science, technology, and innovation in big pharma, although I believe many of the things that I'll touch on will apply to any organization. So I've been in AstraZeneca 10 years or so. I've worked in big pharma my entire career. And what motivates me, why am I in big pharma, why am I in science, is because of the purpose of what we do. What we do in drug discovery is we discover new medicines to treat human disease. For every project that we work on, every collaboration that we put in place has the ultimate objective of improving the quality of human life, of enabling people to live longer. And I can't think of a better aspiration than that. I can't think of a better vision than that. And if this is what we choose to do in our careers, this is what I choose to do in my career, we have to be the best that we can possibly be, because what we are doing is critically important. It's critically important as individuals, it's critically important as organizations. So just moving on to my next slide, I've got a couple of corporate slides just to start the presentation. So this is AstraZeneca's purpose. We push the boundaries of science to deliver life-changing medicines. So any product, you will not get an AstraZeneca medicine other than through a prescription in the UK. We don't manufacture over-the-counter medicines. We're not into more general healthcare activities. We are focused on working at the boundaries of science, where science is breaking to deliver medicines that change human life. And that's quite a dangerous place to be, because if you're really working at the boundaries of science, you're innovating, you're working in the unknown. You have to be brave enough to fail. You have to be inspired enough to succeed, because unless you're failing, you're not innovating, you're not pushing the boundaries of science, and you have to be comfortable with that within your culture. So how do we work across AstraZeneca R&D? What are the four elements, if you like, that are key to how we work? And I'll spend a few minutes on this slide. So the first of these is inspiring people with curious minds. There are two aspects to this. The first is those people who work for us, we look to employ people who have curious minds, who ask the what if, who aren't afraid to fail, who are able to challenge the orthodoxy or are able to do something different. These are inspiring people. They have curious minds. But of course, we also look to inspire those people with the objectives that we put in place. Our aspiration to cure disease. Our aspiration in cancer is to eliminate cancer as a cause of death. To eliminate cancer as a cause of death. And that was something that will happen, maybe not in my lifetime, but in my children's lifetime. To do that, we harness data and technology. We're avid users of data and technology to help us make decisions, help us to move projects forward. We work seamlessly and inclusively. Very easy words. Who wouldn't want to work seamlessly and inclusively? But we want to work seamlessly within AstraZeneca. We want to work inclusively. We want to have a diverse culture. We want to have a culture, we aspire to create a culture where everybody's opinion counts. But also we need to work seamlessly and inclusively with the broader drug discovery ecosystem, ranging from academia to government, to patients, to healthcare systems and the like. Nobody discovered a drug on their own. No individual organization discovered a drug. These are only discovered through collaboration and partnership and working with the best people wherever those people may be. And of course, always learning from patients. Patients ultimately are our customers. Patients are the individuals with disease that we have to learn from. What is the patient experience? What is it important to a patient that the medicine does to improve the quality of their life? It might not be what the scientist in the lab is thinking. It might be something very different. How can we learn to deliver medicines that improve the quality of life? But also, how can we learn from patients at the level of disease to understand what disease really looks like? So in terms of innovation, certainly one of the clear things for me around innovation is if you want to innovate, you clearly need to understand the problems that you need to solve that will have the biggest impact on whatever you're trying to do. And I think this applies in any industry. So in AstraZeneca, what are the four big problems that we need to solve? And I believe these apply to the pharmaceutical industry more broadly. The first is we need to improve our understanding of disease. If we really did understand disease, every medicine that we produce would succeed in clinical studies and it would have a fantastic benefit in patients. The reason so many medicines fail is we don't understand disease, and certainly we don't understand how disease differs across different patients who apparently may have the same disease. So this is a huge challenge facing the industry. How can we design next generation therapeutics? The majority of the medicines that are in the clinic today, you go to Boots, you go to the chemist, get your prescription, you're almost certainly going to get a chemical, small molecule medicine. You might get an antibody therapeutic. We live in an age of transformative innovation. The number of new medicine types that will come to the clinic over the next 10 years is immense. Everything from RNA therapeutics to protein therapeutics to gene therapeutics to cell therapeutics. How can we design that next wave of next generation of therapeutics and convert those scientific opportunities into medicines that can actually deliver value to patients. How can we improve clinical success? How can we get more confident that the medicines that we're researching will actually have efficacy in the clinic? And key to that is understanding how disease differs across patients, the concepts of personalized medicine that we hear about. And a good example of this is 15 years ago, lung cancer was viewed as maybe 3 different diseases. With the advent of DNA sequencing, we now know there are maybe as many as 50 different types of lung cancer, each of which may require its own medicine or combinations of medicines to have efficacy in patients. And how can we pioneer new approaches in the clinic? One of the major challenges in healthcare is patients forget to take their medicines. And that's particularly true in the elderly. So how can we move to a paradigm where we can help patients remember to take their medicines? Simple problem requires a complex solution. So a few key things around innovation that guide us in AstraZeneca and certainly guide me as I'm working with my people. Let's understand the problem we're really trying to solve. Not the problem we think we're trying to solve, not the problem that we believe would benefit somebody else, the problem we're really trying to solve. And know what success looks like. I've been involved in so many drug projects, I've been involved in so many collaborations which have failed. And the reason they failed is because we didn't really understand the problem we're trying to solve, and we didn't really understand what success looked like. And not knowing what success looks like means you can quite often over-engineer things that may be delivered in a different way. Bring together the smartest people, the diverse group of people who are able to contribute to solve that problem. And those smartest people are rarely going to exist in a single organization. AstraZeneca employs 60,000 to 70,000 people, but in any specific drug project, those smartest people will not all be in AstraZeneca. They will be scattered around the globe. And how can we bring together those brains and work collaboratively and bring together those solutions to deliver what we need to bring that medicine to patients? Which brings on to the next term: collaborate, 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 collaborate. Collaborate internally, collaborate externally, break down boundaries, bring people together to be successful. And in terms of collaboration, of course, sharing success. But maybe most importantly, don't be afraid to fail. If you are going to push the boundaries of science, if you are going to work at the cutting edge, many things you do will not work. Inevitably, they will fail. Don't be afraid to fail. Learn from that failure and take that into the next project. And if we reflect on the events of 2020 with the COVID-19 pandemic, and if I reflect on the work in AstraZeneca, we've had 3 major initiatives to address the COVID pandemic. The first is to establish a diagnostic test centre in collaboration with GSK and the University of Cambridge, which is currently testing around about 25,000 patients a day as part of the UK government's test and trace programme. We have our antibody therapeutic, which went from nothing to the initiation of phase 3 clinical vaccine, which we're developing in collaboration with the University of Oxford, and in collaboration with countless organisations around the world who will be manufacturing and delivering this vaccine, which is in late stage clinical studies, and we await the outcome of those over the next few weeks. Understand the problem we're trying to solve, know what success looks like, brings together the smartest people and collaborate. Those behaviours have been very apparent on each of the projects that we have launched around COVID-19. So just a couple of slides talking a little bit around one of our big problems and how we're solving it. So any medicine that we launch has activity against a drug target. So for those of you, many of you will have Aspamil or pain medicines. If you take aspirin or opioid medicines, opioids have activity against something called the opioid receptor. And what I want you to look at over here is just the 2 columns on the right and the pink bars. This data asks the question, why do drug projects fail? And the pink bars are projects that we work on in discovery, and they fail for something we call target validation. The pink bar is in a phase 2 clinical study. In phase 2 clinical studies, that's the first time you test a medicine to see if it really works in patients, and most of the failure is for efficacy. What this tells us is that most of the time we fail because our medicines don't work in the disease that we think they will, which means that fundamentally we didn't understand disease. So we're investing in a range of different technologies to help us understand disease, genomics, so-called multi-omics and functional genomics. And I appreciate many of the audience may not have a scientific background, so I won't talk to these in any great detail, other than functional genomics, which I'll spend a slide or 2 on. But before I do that, I just wanted to reflect on the CRISPR revolution. Many of you will have heard of CRISPR. If you hadn't heard of CRISPR, this is a method that allows you to make a precise change in any gene in the genome. So you can delete genes or you can change genes. And this is a technology that was discovered in 2012, 8 years ago. The two scientists we can see in the picture here are Emmanuel Charpentier and Jennifer Doudna. Jennifer on the left, Emmanuel on the right. They were awarded the Nobel Prize for Chemistry this year for the discovery of CRISPR. 8 years to a Nobel Prize from a discovery is Usain Bolt-like application of science. This is unheard of. This is a technology that is revolutionizing what we do in drug discovery, and I'd argue it is going to revolutionize society more broadly. The picture in the middle, the plate of food, this is the first CRISPR engineered cabbage, which is a cabbage that's engineered to grow in cold condition in northern climates. That was created in 2016. At the bottom here, we are looking at the first patient treated with a CRISPR therapy to cure sickle cell disease. So this involved taking cells from this little girl. They were then engineered with CRISPR in a laboratory. They were put back into that patient. And to all intents and purposes, that patient is cured. Similar clinical trials have run with beta thalassemia, and clinical trials are moving forward in other areas as we speak. So this is the opportunity, one single treatment to cure these crippling diseases. And in 2020, as with everything else, CRISPR-based COVID-19 diagnostic test kits, kits that can be used at the point of care that are ultra-sensitive using CRISPR that will diagnose COVID-19 infection. Massive innovation that is being applied more broadly. And we ask ourselves in drug discovery, how can we use this CRISPR method to help us discover better drugs? And CRISPR is now employed across all of our drug discovery projects in a number of different areas, one of which is something we'll call functional genomics. And what functional genomics allows you to do is in the human body, in each and every one of us, you have about 20,000 genes. What we can do with CRISPR is we can delete those genes one by one to ask the question, what is the effect of each gene on the disease that we're under study, on the cell biology that's under study, to identify new genes that are involved in disease processes. How do we do this? We do this through massive collaboration. Internally in AstraZeneca, on the left-hand side of the slide, we're using robots like the robot you can see here to run these screens, and that's been done in partnership with Horizon Discovery, a Cambridge-based biotech, to create the technologies that will allow us to succeed. We have a major collaboration with the Innovative Genomics Institute. This is an academic institute in San Francisco, where we're creating advances in CRISPR technology that will help us run these screens better. And the major partnership is the one on the right-hand side of this slide. So this is an initiative between AstraZeneca and Cancer Research UK, which is Europe's major cancer research charity. And within this collaboration, we have a group of 25 scientists working together in this building in Cambridge. This is part of the University of Cambridge. It's the Milner Institute. And those scientists work in a single laboratory where we've developed technology together. We're developing methods together. Cancer Research UK are applying that technology to academic drug discovery projects. AstraZeneca is applying the technology to industry drug discovery projects. And to show how it works, a little bit of scientific data. I couldn't resist putting a bit of scientific data into the presentation today. What we're trying to do here is identify new genes that could help us treat prostate cancer. So prostate cancer is driven by a mutation or overexpression of a gene or a protein called the androgen receptor. And what we're asking here is, can we find genes that when we delete them from a cell lead to a loss of androgen receptor protein? And what we have here across the bottom here in blue, this is a CRISPR that knocks out the androgen receptor. So we use CRISPR to knock out the androgen receptor. We see 100% inhibition in this assay. All the black dots are genes that when we knock them out, we see no real effect. And here in the red squares, these are a number of genes that when we knock them out, we see a loss of androgen receptor expression. And what each of these genes represents is a potential new drug target that, if we can inhibit it, could inhibit prostate cancer. Technologies like this did not exist 3 years ago. Technologies like this are creating new drug projects today that are entering AstraZeneca's portfolio. Transformative innovation having a direct effect on what we can do, helping us solve our major problem, which is understand disease. I have 2 slides left as I wrap up. Another area that I could talk about for an extensive time is the breadth of therapeutics. Each of these little circles represents a different type of therapy. So our aspiration in AstraZeneca is to treat every disease we're interested in. Our aspiration is to find a molecule that allows us to treat that disease. And as I said earlier on, most of the molecules that are in the clinic today are small molecules or antibodies. In 5 or 6 years' time, each and every one of these entities will be in the clinic and will be treating patients. I've mentioned CRISPR, therapeutic gene editing, we have here. Messenger RNA therapies. We've all heard a lot about messenger RNA therapies in the last 2 weeks. Messenger RNA technology is the way that both Pfizer and Moderna have developed vaccines that are showing fantastic efficacy against COVID-19. And those are the first messenger RNA medicines that have reached the clinic. But that technology has the potential to treat many different diseases. So again, an age of transformative innovation. We deliver through collaboration. This slide just illustrates our collaborations across the world. We have several thousand collaborations across the world. And they are with academia, we're with biotech, they're with peer pharma, they're with industries, all sorts of different industries. And we can only succeed through partnership and innovation. I'll skip through this slide because I appreciate I'm running late. And I'll just finish with my closing slide here just to first thank you for your attention today. Thanks for the invitation to talk at this meeting. This slide lists a range of different technologies: artificial intelligence, digital healthcare, precision medicine, diagnostic. These are fantastic technologies, but at the end of the day, they are just tools. They are tools to do a job. What allows us to innovate, what allows us to be creative, what allows us to solve problems is bringing together the right people in the right environment with the right mindset to use these tools to do fantastic things. And with that, I will finish. Thank you very much.
Steve, thank you very much indeed. What an interesting job you have. Formidable responsibility, but I appreciate that you've packed a lot in there for us. Before I come to my other guests, perhaps the existing speakers would just like to reflect on some of the questions that are coming up. And I think 3 themes are emerging here. Themes around what's it like to overcome some of the difficulties of pitching ideas. So from Lubna's work, how are we going to find those people who will believe in us? How do we improve the trust and the readiness to have a go at some things? I also sense from the questions there's a desire to get into the gritty reality of failure. And for those of us, perhaps Lubna, Steve, myself, who have positions of responsibility and some power, the ability to accept uncertainty and fuzziness in the world is made easier because to some extent we have positions that are more secure. But if you're in your early career or mid-career, then the challenges of actually coping with managing failure and uncertainty is a recurring theme. And then there is also some themes emerging around whether there is a conflict of interest in the pursuit of efficacy and healthcare and the commercial realities of profit. So I'll just tip my former speakers off that you might want to reflect on some of those. Now, coming to the panel session, we have 3 people joining Lubna and Steve on the panel. We'll start the panel session by getting some initial views from each of them. I'm delighted to introduce you to Anusha Shah to give us her perspective in a second. Anusha is Director Resilient Cities at Arcadis. She's also Royal Academy Engineering Visiting Professor at King's College London on climate adaptation, sustainability and inclusive design. I'm glad I got that full sentence out, so reasonably well there, Anusha. She's also a fellow with the Institution of Civil Engineers. She's recently joined the ICE as its succeeding vice president, and this year she won the UK's Top 50 Women in Engineering Sustainability Award. Anusha, over to you, and thank you very much for being with us today.
Thanks very much, Jonathan. Really, really glad to be. Good morning, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be with you here all this morning. And I thank Gavin to invite me today and be amongst all of you. I would have loved to meet you all in person. I can't see you, but thank God for the technology that we can still engage. So as Jonathan said, I work with a global team at Arcadis, and we work together to help cities build resilience, particularly climate resilience. But since COVID-19, we've added pandemic resilience as well. And as you all know, we live in a very, as they say, the VUCA world, volatile, uncertain, complex, and a very ambiguous world. We anyway had some challenges before COVID hit us, with water scarcity, overpopulation, poverty, energy crisis, and you name it. But the pandemic has shown us one thing, which has kind of shaken us up, is that the systems and the process we have in place are not working. We are not prepared. I mean, I'll give you an example. In the built environment world, we have created infrastructure that is all connected. So failure in one part of the system means we have cascading failure for the rest. For example, flooding happens. It doesn't just impact the houses or the businesses. It disrupts electricity, and we are on a digital revolution. Just imagine if we had a blackout, the whole world would come to a grinding halt. So we need to build resilience at every level. And I always say, like how the saying is, fortune prepares, favors the brave. It has to be converted to fortune favors the prepared now. So we have to be prepared, and obviously resilient cities is talked about a lot. So what it means is not just preparing for an event or the unknown risks. It's about then recovering from it, it's adapting to it, and then using the whole experience to return to something that was better than before. And that's called the resilience dividend, as Judith Rodin, who was the head of 100 Resilient Cities, said. And that's what we need to do. You must have heard terms like bounce back better. So this is a huge opportunity, but we shouldn't wait for crisis for us to get into this scare. Now we've got enough crises in the world where we should be prepared now. We should know that anything can hit us. So how do we change? I think as Lubna said, and Steve said that, how do we make sure that we're collaborating with each other? We can't do it on our own. So if you look at the resilient city, it has, if you look at it, all the ideal resilient city would have the physical hallmarks, like, really good land use planning that enables drainage, protects against sea level rise. You have the green infrastructure, and only build the green infrastructure if you have exploited all green options. Build it to codes for future, do scenario plannings for climate change, and make sure that it's affordable and accessible to people who can't, who are marginalized. COVID-19, again, I keep coming back to it, has shown the societal faults we have. And a good deal of it is invisible. For example, we should have those feedback loops and data systems which capture that data and continuously update and communicate network weaknesses we have. And that social cohesion and cooperation amongst neighborhoods. So how do we build community resilience? That's really, really important. But if governments can't do it all on their own. So it's how do we help each other? Businesses, communities, society, everyone. It's about overhauling the whole system. And no matter what the challenges might arise, it could be a flood, it could be a public health scare, it could be anything. And we know that in 2050, there'll be around 6 billion people will be in cities, because obviously people are moving towards cities, although during the pandemic, a lot of people are moving towards rural areas, but they will be gravitating. So how do we make our cities resilient? How do we make all places resilient is the question, and against all ecological or man-made threats. So it's very important that we are able to withstand all this. And you might say that doing all this, it's such a mammoth task and it comes at a price tag. And then I've got only 5 minutes, I could have dwelled on it more, but it's about who pays for it. Governments around the world are already cash strapped because of the COVID-19, and the public sector alone can't foot the bill, nor can the philanthropic organizations of the world. So it's very important us as private businesses and lend a hand. And it's not just because of moral imperative, it is because we have seen that if we don't prepare ourselves, the business operations don't continue. You saw the real estate in London and elsewhere in the country completely vacant. So pandemic has had huge billions of pounds of loss. So it's so important that we kind of help the government, we help societies to become resilient. It's in everyone's favor. And a collaboration has been a part of both the speeches. And I think I can't stress enough, it's not collaboration for the heck of collaborating. I think genuine collaboration. We have to think beyond our own respective profits and think about that if the society in which we live is resilient, we become resilient. So how can we do it? Some of the solutions are obviously the private sector can do is come up with some innovative funding models, public-private partnerships for infrastructure, and partly fund, say, for example, flood defenses and other things. The other is bringing to market tools and digital tools or processes which build individual resilience for communities. For example, at Arcadis, we've got a tool called Business Resilience Tool, which actually helps quantify social and environmental benefits, because a lot of the time investors are saying they're so focused on financial benefits, and they're saying, like, so how does it matter to us if we have social and environmental? So a lot of reports are in it, but if you don't quantify it, but now they realize that if they don't get societal and environmental resilience, it doesn't make sense. Everyone fails. So, or the other one is building their own resilience as businesses, building the workforce resilience. And some of the barriers are, as was mentioned earlier, is we work in silos, unfortunately. How do we break those silos? And I think it's about doing it every single day in our jobs, challenging those behaviors, challenging and saying, if two teams within a company can't work, what's the chance we have, as for example, as I'm an engineer, us working with social scientists, psychologists, artists, and other people, because it's a societal problem. So it's very, very important we work with everyone. And then it's also about bringing to life those digital tools that help make it quicker, faster, efficient. But if electricity goes, we need a backup. So we need to build resilience with communities. For example, when the Thames Barrier, we didn't have the Thames Barrier, communities used to be, flood drills. We need to get back to that point. We need to have drills and prepare people against fires, against everything, build those scenarios, use those digital simulations and prepare people. So if digital works, brilliant, but if it doesn't work, how do we bring in that resilience? So in the end, I would say that we're not just fighting climate change, we're fighting against time. And it's very, very important. I think there's a cartoon I keep showing on all my slides, which says, if climate change was a hoax, but there's this poster, it says, you still can build healthier cities, greener jobs, everyone's happy, you build a healthy and sustainable life, but what's not good in all that? So this is a massive opportunity for us to redesign our cities, but we have to not think of it as professionals, we have to think and take it as a personal responsibility, because it's up to us. Do we want to leave liabilities for the future generations, or we want to leave assets? And how do we build the leaders for tomorrow now? And I think this is what it's all about, these sessions are. We need the leaders of tomorrow to start thinking of things which we didn't think systems, break silos, collaborate, and innovate at every level, but think of a societal model rather than self. So on that note, I think it's, I could talk all day on this, but obviously there's not enough time.
Thank you very much indeed, Anusha. That was very insightful. Building the leaders of tomorrow is a core theme of this, this conference, and obviously one of the ambitions of the Future Leaders Programme within the Foundation for Science and Technology. Let me now introduce Jade Carlotta Jones, who is a Technology Associate at BP, and ask for a brief perspective from her, and perhaps to say a little more about the Future Leader Programme itself. So Jade, welcome.
Sure, yeah, thank you. And it's really great to be speaking to you all this morning. So as John mentioned, I work at BP. I work in our digital science and engineering organisation. So I joined BP about 5 years ago after graduating with a physics degree. And I've been in primarily two roles. My first role, I actually joined within the trading organisation, so it was quite a big step away, I'd say, from science. And I was mainly focusing on the development of trading software to help traders manage their physical trades, so essentially help them move cargoes across the globe. It was a really great role because it gave me quite a global view. But after doing that role for a couple of years, I did find myself kind of missing the science, and I wanted to implement new technologies and to innovate and to really help aid the energy transition away from fossil fuels. So for the last 3 years, I've been working in this team to really try and help that happen. So in this role, I engage externally a lot. I work with startups, I work with academics, and I also help support people in those roles actually get government help through the industrial strategy to help test and scale technology. I won't go into too much detail on specific projects at the moment, because I know we're running over a bit. But if you've got any questions, please put them in the Q&A. So feel free to ask. So that's just a bit on me and my background. But yeah, the Future Leader program has been really, really quite relevant. It's really helped me understand the other sectors that I work in a bit more broadly, especially with our net zero aims. It's really important that industry, academia and government work together. So kind of echoing everything Anusha was saying. And for those of you working on the call in industry, I would really highly suggest that you apply for the Future Leader program for next year. Not only for the learnings, but also just to meet other people in similar stages of their career, to learn about other people's journeys in science, and also just to network and think about where you might want to go in the future. So it's been really eye-opening in that respect. So yeah, feel free to ask questions.
Thank you very much, Jade. I'm going to introduce our last panel member here, also a former physicist, Carl Sermax. Carl is the lead data scientist at Connected Health at Zimmer Biomet, and as chair I should declare an interest in this one, in that Carl and I worked together for many years here at McLaren as well. So welcome, Carl, nice to see you again. Actually, you'd like to give us your perspective.
Thanks very much, Jonathan. Yeah, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining, and it's a pleasure to speak to you. So as Jonathan mentioned, I'm leading the data science team at a company called Zimmer Biomet. So Zimmer Biomet is one of the leading medical device companies in orthopedics. So the aim of sort of our mission, I guess similar to some of the missions you'll have heard in earlier talks, is around sort of alleviating pain and improving quality of life for orthopedic patients across the world. And I've also been part of the Future Leaders program as well. So I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank Gavin for his tireless efforts on putting the program together over the last year, and also to Jonathan for his sponsorship of that. So thank you. Thanks to you both. The program has been really relevant for me, as Jade touched on, sort of really understanding how, particularly for me, how government plays a role in sort of these interactions around sort of innovation and technology. So, I mean, as a specific example that I'm encountering in my role at the moment. So Lubna touched on sort of artificial intelligence and how it's in some ways sort of quite different to sort of traditional sort of medical and sort of clinical applications. You know, talking about probabilities and the fact that one of the strengths of AI and machine learning technology is that it gets, it's meant to get better over time. It's meant to learn from its experience and improve as more people interact with it, which is sort of in contrary to sort of traditional sort of medical device development, where devices are developed against standards, shown to meet requirements, and then expected to not change unless they go through some sort of formal change control procedures. So in understanding how that sort of new technology can work in a sort of safe but sort of pragmatic way, the interaction between sort of government to help sort of define and sort of update those standards with academia, sort of defining sort of best practice around fairness and also new technology and sort of in the space. Robotics was mentioned earlier as well, and then industry contributing towards sort of putting some of those ideas into practice as well. So just to echo what Jade said, I think anyone who's interested in those types of areas and learning more about the interactions between those different domains, I'd encourage to get some more information about the Future Leaders program for next year. So yeah, Jonathan, thanks very much. I'll hand back over to you.
Thank you very much, Carl. Can I ask all of the panel members now to turn on their videos so that we can see you? Very good. And Steve and Lubna as well. Thank you. So as I mentioned, there were a few themes emerging in the questions. We've got about 25 minutes or so to work through a host of questions, and I thank the audience for that. Please remember that you can upvote questions that you find particularly resonant on the system here, and please add your own questions as well, and I'll do my best to group them together and work through as many as we can. Let me throw the first one out, which is, perhaps we'll start with Lubna. As somebody who was going out to industry or coming out to the world with a new idea and meeting that kind of resistance. Can you describe some of the approaches you took to find those early adopters who were prepared to back you and back technology in that balance? So give us some insight into what that was like and how you approached it.
Yeah, I think I heard the early days really going to one of the industry conferences in Barcelona, and you know, it's all industry. I mean, there is less people from, you know, academic or scientists, and being there and listening to what is the problems in that space. But finding a needle in haystack in these conferences or in these venues was very difficult, especially because I would say there are a lot of innovation teams there where they are across a horizontal. They are not specific problems, but they kind of manage to link with organisms. For me, was almost how can I find someone who has a problem owner in the organization, in the clients that I'm working with, and how I understand their problems, and also identify links to technology, how my technology would help them. I think finding that person is very important. So and position yourself as an entrepreneur or in their positions, and there are many obstacles for to navigate internally and so on. So starting small and showing the benefits is very crucial, and not starting and thinking that with one collaboration you can get there. It might take the first project. It took years before it was the fruit, but then they become one of the major clients. So, and then having a journey and being patient, and it's very important. And it's only about solving the problem. It's also about articulating the benefits, analyzing the impact, and going step for step. Also giving the sponsor tools that they can navigate that discussion internally, and that they can open up more doors for us as a startup. Because companies, especially life sciences or other big companies, will only work with a small company if they can do the work with another big vendor. That only scenario has happened. So in order to do that, to really. Yeah.
Just 1 second. We're getting a little bit of breakup on your microphone. I wonder if I can come back to you in a second. If you could just have a look at your microphone settings. It's prattling.
Okay.
Perhaps if I can just put another subject in here, which is the paradox of organizations wanting seemingly competitive things to be true at the same time. Let's talk about failure, which is a recurring theme in here. Steve nicely articulated the need to have a culture where failing or failing fast can be embraced. But we also know that the pressures of a commercial system and efficiency lead us to wanting to eliminate failures and process errors. So we've got these conflicting purposes or conflicting themes in an organization. Anusha, perhaps you talked about efficiency in resources and the way that networks come together. Perhaps you could say something about the cultural challenges and insights that you have around accepting perhaps failure and the realities of that.
Yeah, thanks, Jonathan. I think that is a barrier, and you're absolutely right. Especially in the built environment industry, unfortunately, the culture is such that we're very risk averse as a community. So if we want to test new products or innovations, there's still not enough appetite to test something, and if it fails, and then it's just left on the side. So that kind of demotivates people who are trying to test new products or technologies. For example, if you're testing something, concrete is the biggest polluter, as we know, in the whole world. So if people are trying new things on concrete, trying with new materials and stuff, and it needs that culture that money is given when you're doing R&D. There is enough money for that it can fail once or twice, and those people who are testing it should be applauded and should be said, at least they made an effort to come up with something new. It failed, but they learned lessons, and those lessons need to be captured. And then, so it's about how do you incentivize people who are at least trying. So there are two groups of people who are not even trying, but there are people who are trying and failing. So those people need to be rewarded and awarded, I think. That's going to bring that culture. And I think we need to also understand that we've got products and services it's going to take a huge amount of time and a completely different mindset to change those products. You know, I come back to concrete, I come back to steel. So on that, has to be funding to try new elements, to try new things. And but it's not in isolation. It's in totality about changing the leadership as well. How much the leadership is empathetic to those people who are trying to innovate. But unfortunately, in reality, it happens is everyone talks about innovation, but there's A, not enough funding, and B, not enough support. If it works and it brings in business, then there's a big pat on the back. But if it doesn't, then it's just left on the side, and that demoralizes people. So I think the solution is the government, the private sector, and everyone needs to applaud failure and applaud people who are trying, if that makes sense. Because if they're trying, then they're more motivated to try new things. And as with all inventions, you know, after lots of tries, something comes up and that works. It's not easy, I would say, Jonathan. It's not.
No, Steve, would you like to build on that since you raised the theme?
Yeah, no, a few comments from me. Thank you. The first of which is around culture and how culture views failure. In the US, Boston, San Francisco, failure is not, those who have taken the risk, who've had the idea, who've started their spin-out company, who have tried, and that company fails, are very, very rarely penalized for failure. And having had the initiative, the bravery, whatever the right word is, to do it once, that puts those individuals in a very strong position to do it again. I think in the UK there is a different perspective on failure. Within pharma, our approach, certainly within AstraZeneca, our approach is there is no such thing as failure if you attempt to do something innovative, bold, that could transform what you do. There is a penalty for failure if your thought, penalty is a strong word, I shouldn't use the word penalty, but people are not rewarded. If you fail because you did it wrong, you made mistakes, you did something silly, you didn't engage with the right people, those failures are something that we would pick up on, and we would engage in, help support the individual to recognize the mistakes they made along the way. But a project that was executed well, that resulted in a failed result, that's life. Move on, do the next one. And people are rewarded for that in exactly the same way as they're rewarded for those projects that deliver a clinical candidate or deliver a medicine.
Jonathan, can I just add something there? Yeah,
I have Carl come in, and then Lubna, I'll come across to you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, sorry, I was just going to build on what's already been said, and so I think for people who are sort of thinking, okay, how can I put this into practice? I think if you're shown to be, or if you can show yourself to be sort of trying and experimenting, but as also making sure that there are tools or sort of or processes to enable the organization to learn as you do those things, then I think that will always be sort of celebrated and supported. So if you do fail, and I sort of agree with sort of Steve's sentiment that already the word fail is sort of loaded with a connotation, but if you're shown to be sort of capturing why things didn't go so well, what can be done better next time, sharing that knowledge with the organization, and sort of bring sort of eliciting feedback as well, then I think that will always play well in your organization, and will probably outweigh any sort of reluctance that there is to sort of take risks in the first place.
Thank you, Carl. Lubna, did you want to try again?
Yeah, try now. Can you? So, yes, so on failure, I would say, celebration or build that resilience to try and again. It's not all about creating that safe environment where we can fail and stand again. Also about giving the reward when it is and not expecting so many comments. I have with my kids, and I have and you can see entrepreneurs or people that have had a sometimes difficult past that the resiliency is built up, and they can try things, and failure becomes just part of life. And I think that also find a balance. If we celebrate everything, it's also not good, but what we can do, create this safe environment where we try things, and if it works, if it doesn't work, with something else. That's what I think. And with the park at also, we have the park and the city. So the park, we try those things, and once it's tested and it works, and then we can launch it. That's when it is in the city, but in the park, that environment where we fail most of the time.
Thank you. I'm going to come to Jade now, perhaps. Jade, when you started in your career, having come from a physics background, moving into perhaps a more commercial environment, you might have a perspective here. I've got a number of questions from the audience that relate to the challenges of interdisciplinary work. And if we listen to what Anusha has said about the need to bring the stack of academia, industry, society, governments to work together, we know that interdisciplinary work is important for complex problem solving. Through your experiences and through the BP lens, what are the challenges and the things that your organization is doing to help overcome some of those challenges? And what's your perspective on interdisciplinary working?
Sure. So I think one of the biggest challenges is maybe a difference in expectations. So when it comes to academia, I think naturally when something is very new and very innovative and maybe hasn't been trialed, it can take a lot of time for it to actually get to a point in which it can be deployed and tested. And not only that, even if the technology works, there then has to be a set of regulatory changes or policy changes to ensure that that can be deployed in particular environments. So if I just talk about some of the things which I've worked on as well, which have tried to help that. I think in February, BP released their new strategy, and one of those is AIM4, which is all around quantification and tracking of methane, as well as then publicizing that data. So I've been working with a number of different startups, some of which initiated in academia, to develop applications of quantum technologies to help develop new sensors which can do methane detection from a distance. And exactly like you said, there are challenges with doing that when you're working with academia. Maybe there is some government funding to help that company get to where it is and get to where it needs to be in order for it to be deployed. And then, so what's really helpful actually is if you are bringing in government at the beginning and you have someone who's essentially signed it off to say, yes, I can see the value of this technology scaling, then it means that there is maybe a clearer pathway to help when it then comes to be able to deploy that technology for the legislation. So challenges in our operation environments are things like certification to ensure that it would work around volatile gases. And of course, if you're early stage, you're not going to think about that legislation right at the beginning because you need to prove that the technology works first. So I think having kind of programs and means to access funds to help startups grow and to help spin outs from universities as well. So I think Bristol and Cambridge are really great examples of places where they're very, very good at spinning out startups from university, but actually having a mechanism through, for example, the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund to help academia spin out into startups and then gain industry support from the beginning is actually a really good way to try and address some of those challenges.
So it does help if I unmute. We've got a house rule here at McLaren that if you talk when the mute button is on, you pay to charity. So that's one I will give. Can I then just throw that question across to Anusha? Interdisciplinary challenges, what's your insights?
Jonathan, I think it's at every levels. For example, how do you get, I'll talk about my industry, how do you get civil engineers to work with mechanical engineers? We only work when we need their help on a certain project, or electrical engineers. So it's that inner circle. Then how do you get civil engineers in general to work with other professionals? And then it's other professionals working with the government, with wider society. I think it all starts with leadership. It's the top down, changing the cultures within an organization. And again, I come to incentivizing it as well. So during appraisals, if you've got, when you're appraising certain professionals, some percentage of it would be how much have you collaborated on your project? And did you collaborate not when you needed them towards the end or the middle, when you needed some inputs from them on the design, or did you collaborate them right from the start when you have the need of a community need comes for either a, I don't know, water treatment plant to a bridge or anything, it could be anything. But have you collaborated right at that point? The first thing you would be, you don't want to go to a society as a mechanical engineer, a civil engineer, as a scientist, as someone, you go as one community. So you ask the communities and bring them on the table. So that collaboration needs to start at the very beginning. And the leaders have to constantly, don't just talk about collaboration. You have to challenge, how are you collaborating? Give me evidence of where you've collaborated. Could you have done it sooner? So those things have to be, so that it makes it more tangible.
Thank you very much. Carl, anything you want to add on
that? Yeah, I think I'm sort of echoing what Anusha said, really. I think at an individual level, if you're working or sort of you're working sort of closely with other disciplines, starting to interact with them a bit more, I think sitting alongside each other, getting to understand each other's pain, if you like, or sort of pain points. What's on a collaborative project, what is what's difficult for an embedded software engineer, what's difficult for a designer, what's difficult for a user experience, what's difficult for a commercial sort of commercial person, commercial lead. I think all that helps to sort of build a sort of collaborative spirit, because then people can start to help each other sort of maybe outside their discipline. Oh, well, that's difficult for you, I can solve that problem for you. So I think sort of really working as closely, it sounds obvious, but working as closely as possible to understand each other's pain, I think is really important. And then I think at a sort of higher level, I mean, something that I've had quite a bit of experience in and still probably never quite felt I've got it right, is around industry academic collaborations. And I think a lot of that comes down, at least for me, I think when I look back, it comes down to really what is the sort of shared, what's the shared goal and the shared benefit? Because I think if that's not set out sort of clearly and explicitly from the beginning, then the collaboration will always run into, it's natural that a commercial organization and a academic body will not necessarily have the same sort of, the same objectives, same goals. But I think if that's not sort of set out right from the outset, really to understand, well, what's the thing that we're trying to achieve together here that we can't achieve separately, and get agreement on that, then I think that's where a lot of these things can fall over.
Thanks, Carl. I've got a question from Ven Chesterton that's been upvoted by 9 people here around the relationship between UKRI, or Innovate UK, and industry, and the way that works. And the question is, how useful is UKRI or Innovate UK in all of this? Do you engage? Does it line up well for you? We've got some experiences in McLaren of that, but I'm keen. Perhaps Steve, if under the sort of research councils in UKRI, what's your experience? You're on mute, Steve. That's a pound.
Sorry. So we've worked very closely, as you might expect, with Research Councils UK and their predecessors, MRC, BBSRC, and the like. And maybe a couple of comments. Firstly, around Innovate UK and the catapult infrastructure that Innovate UK has established. We have, so within the pharma industry, or within my field, the Medicines Discovery Catapult that was established about 3 years ago in Audley Park is the catapult that services or works with our sector. We have very strong relationships with the Medicines Discovery Catapult, whereby we are sharing technologies, we're sharing problems. We have scientists embedded within the Medicines Discovery Catapult. They have scientists embedded within AstraZeneca. And what we're doing is we're working in partnership with them to bring, it's largely bringing new technology solutions to bear that will help address our problems, whilst at the same time, those technology solutions then become available to the UK bioscience base to help solve the UK biosciences problems. So that we found works incredibly well. In terms of broader Research Council funding, we are continually providing input into the big problems that we believe we need to solve, as are all other organisations. We work closely to shape grand challenges as they emerge from the research councils, and this is part and parcel, and it plays to one of the questions that I saw on the Q&A. This is part and parcel of the work that we do to then reinvest in academia to try and bring forward the next generation of blue sky innovation that can help us progress. So I think it's working well. Yeah, my only criticism, or I think a common criticism of industry, of many of the funding bodies, is they do move slowly, move very slowly. And certainly they move very slowly compared to equivalents in the US.
Thank you very much, Steve. Anybody else want to come in on UKRI? Okay. One of the questions here but it's come from a number of people, is around the potential conflicts of interest, perhaps around purpose. Big pharma, big petrochemical industries, sometimes in the headlines for profiteering. That's my word, not on the question. Do you find an internal debate, any kind of conflict or purpose challenge that's disquieting among your younger people coming in about the challenges of making profit, which is of course necessary to sustain an organization, and then advancing a place like healthcare or energy provision? So I'd like to hear perhaps a little bit from Jade as a person coming in. Are you sometimes challenged on the wider impacts of the energy industry and some of the good work we know, particularly it's being spearheaded at BP for climate change and renewables?
Yeah, and there is certainly an internal debate, I guess, that I have with myself, of course. People ask me why I'm working in the sector, given especially the history, and hopefully with all of the new strategies that are coming out of all of the big petrochems, it's changing. So, as we all know, the energy challenge is a really, really, really hard thing to try and solve. It's a dual challenge, not just of how we decarbonize, but how do we provide more and more energy as billions of people are being lifted out of poverty and they will naturally have a higher energy requirement? And how do we provide that in a way that's affordable and accessible? The way I see it is it's actually a really great challenge to work on. It's a really, really hard thing. And I personally, I think there's a question around kind of how can I see myself as a future leader working in this type of environment. And I personally see that my leadership skills are actually developing a lot working in this environment. I mean, yes, I could work elsewhere, and I could work in an industry that doesn't have the same reputation, but I actually do genuinely believe that I can make more of a difference by helping the energy sector move to lower carbon energy sources, to help partner with cities and regions to help provide energy, to help deploy technology to reduce our impact, because of course this isn't going to happen overnight. I don't think anyone would expect the oil and gas sector just to kind of switch off and for the world to continue kind of normally tomorrow. It's a transition. And I think, doing what I do and helping the industry move through the projects that I'm working on. So I mentioned some stuff I'm working on in methane. I'm also working on other projects around enabling renewables to scale through things like peer-to-peer as well. And on top of this, helping make these operations safer. So yeah, I personally see it as a really great opportunity to try and make a difference. I do have internal debates about it.
Thank you. Well, thank you for being so articulate and thoughtful about the answer, and being so open about that. I think that's a great answer. Thank you, Jade. Steve, I know you'll have reconciled that in your mind, but for the people who are mid-career in your industry, is that a theme that Big Pharma are the profiteering?
Yeah, it's a very good question. Well, firstly, Jade, I just like to thank you for quite an inspirational answer to the question. Actually, that was really quite provocative and thoughtful. So I think there's clearly a view out, the general view out there is big bad pharma profiteering out of medicine, and that view is reinforced every time we see in the press of some company. It's normally a small company that doesn't do any original research of its own, buys a medicine from somebody else and increases the price tenfold, and is profiteering out of that medicine. Within companies like AstraZeneca, GlaxoSmithKline, Pfizer, and the like, we see, personally, I see no conflict. What I do see is a big gap in terms of the communication about the good that the pharmaceutical industry does for society. Something our CEO, Pascal Soare, always says, any new medicine, you get a patent for 25 years. It's during that period of 25 years, and it's not normally 25 years, because by the time that medicine gets to market, it's normally 15 years. Those are the 15 years that you can recoup the cost of investment of that medicine and all of the other medicines that have failed. And at the end of that 25-year period, that medicine is free for the rest of time. That medicine is free to society for the rest of time. And it's also been said that the previous head of the FDA said, if the pharma industry never discovers another medicine, mankind will be absolutely fine. Now, I disagree with that, because there's still some very, very critical diseases that we wish to treat, we wish to cure. But the point being that the advances that the pharma industry has made in terms of healthcare have revolutionized society over the last 100 years. So I don't see it as a conflict at all. I don't believe our people see it as a conflict. What our people are frustrated by, and I think many scientists are frustrated by, is our inability to break down the barrier of big bad pharma, the perception of big bad pharma, when big bad pharma, at the end of the day, Pfizer, Moderna, hopefully AstraZeneca with its vaccine, Sanofi with its vaccine, these are the organizations that repeatedly do deliver the medicines that transform disease. And I see the same in other industries. The only industry that is going to move away from a high carbon environment are those industries that currently depend on it, because they either have to change or they fail. That is the biggest motive to do something about it. And the same is true, I think, across the board.
Thank you, Steve. I'm afraid we're running hard against the clock at the moment. I'm going to have to call time. Perhaps you'll permit me just one anecdote from a personal point of view. I used to run a research and development group for electronic warfare in the defense industry. And that was a difficult one over a dinner table. I can tell you it was not a comfortable position to be. So on that, I want to thank my audience for the fantastic barrage of questions that I've had here. Hopefully you feel that I've been able to pull those themes out. I particularly want to thank my audience for a very candid and insightful, diverse group of thoughts on this. I wish we had more time. So thank you all very much. And I'm going to hand back now to Gavin to explain what happens next in terms of the breakout sessions. But if I could particularly thank my two keynote speakers, Dr. Lubna Burfa and Steve Rees. I very much appreciate your preparation for the day. Gavin, over to you.
Thanks, Jonathan, and thanks to all the panel, and thanks to you, Jonathan, for chairing today, which has been a great session. Now it's actually your turn as the audience to discuss some of the issues that we've heard about and any other issues that you want to throw into the mix. Obviously, there were quite a few things in the Q&A that we didn't get round to discussing. So the way it's going to work is exactly the same as the way it worked yesterday. If you were on the call yesterday, we're going to finish this plenary session, and then you need to log in again to one of 3 meetings. and the websites to log into are exactly the same as they were yesterday. So if the surnames A to G, log into the one on the top, FFL 101, FFL 102 for H to P, and slightly bizarrely, FFL 106 for surnames Q to Z. Once again, once this meeting finishes, you'll also have the chance to, it'll take you to a website where you can just click through and go there automatically. So we'll stop this plenary session now and we'll restart the discussion period in a minute or two's time on the next system. Thank you very much and see you very soon.